If you think of all the things we've spent our money on, there are two kinds of purchase decisions one can take in context of anything in life. First is a practical purchase, and second is an emotional purchase. And this decision isn't an either or a binary argument. The decision lies on a spectrum, with the practicality of it on one side, while the emotional value of it on the other. Now, this is how it works. Buying a flat right within your means while getting a loan with an EMI less than 40% of your salary. Practical purchase. Getting a sea-facing bungalow at a prime location in Mumbai, 30 times costlier than your annual income, paying a down payment from your entire life savings with an EMI more than 60% of your monthly salary that you will pay for the next 30 years of your life. Why? Because once in your childhood, your dad told you about his dream of having a house like that. Emotional purchase. Now, while this is an extreme example of the duality of a purchase, anything and everything that you decide to spend your money on lies on this spectrum. The more emotional value a thing holds in your mind, further ahead it goes on the spectrum, making less sense on the practical and utilitarian aspects of it. It doesn't decide whether the thing is practical or impractical to own. It just isn't relevant anymore. Now, why am I intellectualizing basic purchase decisions in a bike review? Meet the Super Meteor 650, the latest and a flagship launch from Royal Enfield. While the world is talking about various aspects of this new beauty in town, we will focus on the fundamentals of this bike. First, let's address the obvious characteristics that you've already heard everyone talk about. Impeccable looks and road presence, supreme fit finish and build quality, incredible parallel to an engine, heavy in torque, nothing new but extremely potent, royal riding stance, low ground clearance, stiff suspension, heavy weight, humongous turning radius, and a soothing exhaust note. There, summed up all the pros and cons of this bike. You can tune out right away and save yourself the time and watch something more worthwhile. Or we can dive deeper and explore how all of these characteristics mold the fundamentals of this bike and find out why and for whom does this bike exist. If you decide to purchase this bike, the first driving force for you to go for it has to be the way it looks. Taking inspirations from the Harleys and the Indians of the world, Royal Enfield still has somehow managed to pick up all the right things and carve out its own identity as a true Royal Enfield original, while sticking to its purely cruiser aesthetics. I'd also go out of my way to say that this is more close to being a cruiser than my own GT650 is in being a cafe racer. Too complicated? Let me explain. While my GT650 bends the rule of a cafe racer by carrying a lot heavier weight, has a slightly soft-sprung suspension, and not as much of an aggressive riding stance, the Super Meteor doesn't compromise on its authenticity. Longer wheelbase, fatter tire, taller handlebars, low ground clearance, stretched out foot pegs, the list goes on and on, making it the unapologetic cruiser motorcycle. You swing a leg over it and you instantly feel the style it oozes. Makes you feel like you own the road with a relaxed and commanding riding position. You ride it anywhere in the world and people will notice you, stop you, ask what bike it is, how much it costs, and what's the mileage like. If you like attention, you will love the attention this bike gives you. Also, if you yourself pay close attention to the bike and the way it is built, this is where it feels like Royal Enfield has finally arrived and come into its own. The brand has evolved over the years and it shows with the fit and finish of this bike. Right from the powder coat to the brush finish on the handlebars. Every part looks posh, making it truly a flagship that it is. No other Royal Enfield is so well put together. The engine is nothing different from the 650 twins launched 4 years ago, which is kinda disappointing, but Royal Enfield probably took the if it ain't broke, don't fix it approach. The same mill producing 47 horses and 52 Newton meters of torque, which is enough for the city and touring as well, with the same sweet twin-cylinder rumble. Man, it never gets old. This, however, sounds a tad bit different from my GT650, and in a good way. Not sure if it's just me having placebo, but this sounds slightly similar to a Harley's uneven exhaust note than the smooth rumble of the 650 twins, which suits the character of this bike. And I can't wait till people slap cheap cans without baffles on this one to make it sound like a single cylinder like they do with the GT and the Interceptor. I'd rather keep the stock exhaust on this one and let it sound gentle and graceful the way it looks. But that's just me. You won't be disappointed with the engine and the feel you get riding this bike. Be it anywhere between 10 to 150 km per hour, the engine will be comfortable and stress-free. Also, the low-end torque comes in very handy to get you through any situation without juggling between gears frequently. And when you do, the gearbox too is velvety smooth and slick shifting. So there's no scope for complaint. But the way it looks, the way it rides, is everything hunky-dory with this bike? Absolutely not. The Super Meteor surely does come with its flaws. This is where the practicality versus emotion argument comes into picture. The authentic cruiser identity comes at a cost. Cruisers originate from the American biking culture, where bikes are not a mean of transport but a toy of leisure. That sounded very wrong. But simply speaking, people there don't own bikes for utilitarian purposes. They have cars for that. Bikes are purely for the entertainment and adventure that comes with it. The bikes they own cost similar, if not more than the cost of their cars. Hence, the value of money proposition is already out of the window. This gives birth to the need of a highly specific kind of bike to cater to a specific kind of a purpose. Or in other words, lifestyle. There are sports bikes, touring bikes, adventure bikes, dirt bikes, cruiser bikes that rarely share their purposes with the other category, making them great at what they're supposed to do, but not necessarily versatile. You can't comfortably tour on a sports bike or go off-roads on a cruiser. In India, however, the biking culture began from a completely utilitarian standpoint, where the first vehicle one buys is the most purpose-driven option they can afford for their budget. And the purpose, more often than not, is to travel from point A to point B. This gives birth to the commuter category of motorcycles, vehicles that are meant to do it all, like the Splendors and the Activas of the world, that give the most value, comfort and fuel economy for the price they come at. This is why the value for money aspect of anything is more important to the Indian customer than others in the world. The Indian market has very recently started shifting towards the enthusiast category of biking that looks beyond the mere utility and practicality of a motorcycle. With the stylish looking low stance, beefy and heavy build, humongous size and personality of a proper cruiser, the Super Meteor doesn't pretend to be an everyday motorcycle. Starting with the ergonomics, given its size and the space it needs to turn, you will have a hard time navigating it through tight spaces between vehicles. Foot pegs are far ahead and stretched out than usual. Me coming from a cafe racer, I found myself searching for the foot pegs for a few seconds before I finally land my feet on them. You will be the most civilized and a proper rider on the road. Not by choice, but by necessity. This bike won't leave you any scope to ride rash or be a hooligan. And that's great for everyone else.
I don't think this is a good idea. Oh no! This is a nightmare, dude. Such kind of maneuvers.
So you will find it a little difficult to ride in the Mumbai traffic. But it's a matter of time till you get used to it. The stiff suspension and low ground clearance will always leave you uncomfortable and anxious for the most part on the Indian roads. With potholes bigger in size than apartments in Mumbai, you will definitely get the poetic justice of calling it a meteor crater.
Alright, here we go for an off-road test. This is, again, as I mentioned in my earlier videos, this is a special road that we've designed to test the bikes that come on this channel. So yeah, so it's with the Super Meteor. I'm getting to test how well does the bike perform in bad roads, or in this case, embarrassing roads. It's not like we've got bad roads by default. We've got good roads. It's just that I've designed it to test it. I don't know how many times I'm gonna say this lie to myself, but whenever. But content hai, to jahan hai. This is usually the detour that I take to avoid this patch of potholes, but today I'll be taking one for the team. A bike review करेगा मैं रखोगे तो potholes तो cover करेंगे ही ना, और उसके साथ suspension भी test कर देंगे. I'm not at all exaggerating, okay? I'll just be this is a good test. So the thing with this suspension is it's got two weaknesses. Firstly, it can't be too soft because that will take away its highway stability. Secondly, it can't be too soft because the ground clearance is very low. So what that does is, if you have a softer set of suspensions, it will then bottom it out and will touch the ground. And already with such stiff suspension, it is performing pretty well over speed breakers, but when there are unusually tall speed breakers, you can't really do anything about it. Okay, enough of potholes, dude. I need to take another detour because I can't take this anymore. This feels good. See, I told you, actually we've got good roads. It's just that I love Ramesh Pakancharan too much. These are my pothole friends. Yep, I've given them the names. I do meet them once in a while and share my love for Mother Earth. See, now these potholes are fine, right? Sorry, these speed breakers are fine, but subscribers, like, what is wrong with me? See, tuck karke it hurt. That's what I was talking about.
So you will also find it difficult to ride this bike on the bad roads of India. But it's again just a matter of time till you get used to it. Well, then if not in traffic, if not on bad roads, then maybe on the Indian highways is where you'll get to enjoy the full potential of this bike.
Not going to be risking too much on these roads, but yeah, that gives you an idea of how it just darts ahead once you give it the go. What I've noticed about riding this bike on the highways, I, coming from a Continental GT, for the conditioning that I've done myself and my body, for the riding ergonomics, I don't find this comfortable enough. What? Now there's a reason for that. What the fuck? Firstly, my body is accustomed to riding a cafe racer, right? In which the weight is on your knees. Sometimes on your wrist as well while braking, but it is predominantly on your knees. So with that kind of conditioning, when I'm riding a cruiser motorcycle, my knees are at completely relaxed position, right? But my hip and my lower back is taking all the weight. Above that, when I'm sitting right over the suspension with a stiffer setting and with such undulated road, I'm getting a lot of jerks on my lower back like this. That is not making my ride comfortable enough. But this can be different for different people, coming from different kinds of riding styles. If you are upgrading from an adventure, then you probably will feel at home, because that's exactly the kind of riding ergonomics that this bike has. I mean, I'm not compared, but visually it looks very, very similar. Same is the case with classic 350 owners, where the foot pegs aren't really that forward set, but the ergonomics seem a little similar. But if you're upgrading from an R15 or a sporty natured bike, a CBR also for that matter, where you have got rear set foot pegs, then you might find this quite alien. But again, I've already gotten used to the riding ergonomics. Like, I can understand how to control the vehicle. Now in terms of comfort, it is obviously going to take me some while, right? There's that. But I genuinely think that they could have done better with the suspension at the rear, because the first impression that you get looking at this bike, with the seat that it's got and the ergonomics that it has, it looks like a comfortable bike, but it is not as comfortable as it looks, and suspension plays a major part in it. This is at the softest setting one can get, right? So if at all there could be some way to soften the suspension even further, then that would have made a world of a difference. But yeah, the Achilles heel of this bike is the suspension.
But then, even if you get used to the stiffer suspension, the ergonomics play a major role on how this bike performs in touring over longer distances. Again, the way it looks may seem comfortable, and the way you sit on it may look relaxed and commanding, which it is, but there's a catch.
Another thing that I'm slightly bugged about is the lack of windshield. You clearly need your windshield, and I need it more than my Continental GT. Again, me being the Continental GT rider that I am, all of my perspectives are going to come from there, right? So bear with me. What I was saying was I need a windshield more on this one than my Continental GT, and there's a reason for that, because while riding a cafe racer, your weight is more on the front, right? You're leaning forward, so there's a lot of resistance to the wind as well. But see, this is the kind of suspension, this is how the suspension acts on these kind of roads. Anyway, now with this riding situation, your knees are up front, your feet are forward, and naturally you're also stretching ahead to grab the handlebar, and then naturally your body leans behind, so all your weight shifts towards the back. Over and above all of that, when you're at higher speeds, 100 plus, the amount of wind blast that you get keeps pushing you even further back, so you have to struggle against the wind, right? And that is when you need a windshield. Now, I haven't checked how the windshield helps and works, but on this bike or even the Meteor, but I'm hoping that it works as it should. But yeah, you clearly need a windshield if you're planning on touring on this bike, because otherwise there'll be a lot of strain on your entire body, because you're fighting against the wind, right, constantly. But yeah, that's another observation that I had.
Along with the windshield, you'd also need a touring seat that comes as an accessory to help you stay comfortable over longer distances. Touring seats are slightly firmer than normal seats, and over time provide enough support and don't let your butt dig into the seat and cause discomfort. Bottom line, you may find it difficult riding this bike on the Indian highways, given that you do not do the necessary upgrades to suit your purpose. But if you do, you will find a way around it, and eventually, it's just a matter of time till you get used to it. But not everything is awkward with this bike. Some things, in a strange way, are good. Like the way it looks seems very heavy, and it surely is. It is also 40 kgs heavier than my own GT650, but it surprisingly feels lighter than my bike.
What?
Speaking of the weight, it is managed very well. Looking at the spec sheet, this bike is heavier, a lot heavier than my Continental GT. Continental GT is obviously already the heaviest of all. When you compare it with this, it is surprising how it feels a lot lighter than it is. Reason is firstly the handlebars. The handlebars are quite upright, so you've got better leverage. The longer the leverage, the better the weight management of the motorcycle. Secondly, the engine sits a lot lower than it does on my Continental GT as well. So you get a lower center of mass, center of gravity, and that helps in the weight management. I found it more easier moving around with more than my Continental GT. That's surprising, but yeah, that's what it is. And the weight management is also way better than a Classic, because Classic is also quite top heavy.
But even then, there are so many things that you need to get used to, that you need to change, upgrade, and adjust on this bike to make it work for your purpose. Then what is this bike meant to do for the way it is? I remember owning the Classic 350 last year and saying something about the bike. It may not seem like the most practical bike for the traffic, for off-roads, or even the highways, but when I take it to a country road and ride it on the 5th gear at 60 km per hour, that is where the bike listens. That is where it speaks to me. That is where it brings that smile on my face. You take the Super Meteor through the traffic, through the bad roads, through the highways, and bring it all the way to a remote country road with little to no traffic and cruise at 60 km per hour. That is where the bike belongs. That is where it will want you to be. That is where it will reward you to come all the way after all the changes, upgrades, adjustments, and getting used to that you've done. And trust me, it will all be worth it. And after all the shortcomings that I've noticed on my way to come to this place, when I rode it here, it all vanished into thin air. That's when it started making sense. Such bikes, like the Super Meteor, are meant for a small niche of people that cater to a very specific purpose of riding. And when you give it that, all other aspects of riding become irrelevant, And I probably get this more than anyone else because I own a similar kind of a ride. The GT650 is sold in very less numbers too. Not the most practical in traffic, on bad roads or even touring. But my love for the machine, the way it looks, the way it rides, the way it handles in the twisties, the way it just darts ahead when I give it the go, makes everything else irrelevant. I don't honestly care how others find my bike. It brings a smile on my face every time I ride it, and I completely forget all of its shortcomings. And I don't pretend to forget them, I honestly do. If you have fallen in love with the Super Meteor, firstly for the way it looks, which honestly is very easy, and then for the way it makes you feel when you ride it, you wouldn't care about its shortcomings. And in the long run, you too will forget about all of them.
Like for instance, here's the Mini Cooper, right? For the price that it comes at, probably more than 40-50 lakhs, I guess. If you think of it from a practicality standpoint, it would be the worst choice one would ever take, right? But look at the charm of that car, man, oh man. And it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. It makes sense to that owner, to the owner of that car, but it doesn't have to make sense to you and me. And that's what these enthusiastic products are all about. I don't know if that even makes sense, but products, vehicles and cars that cater to enthusiasts.
With bike reviews, YouTubers and even journalists give you a detailed and unbiased opinion of their first impressions with a bike. You watch them and create your own opinion of the bike without giving it much thought. What one doesn't factor in is the human tendency to adapt to literally anything. Long-term reviews surely do help a huge deal to give you a comprehensive feedback, but for any given vehicle, there's nothing that you can't manage or adapt to. Same is with this bike. There is nothing horribly wrong with the Super Meteor. The flaws it has can be lived with and over time get so unnoticeable that you stop thinking about them. That's when you make it your own. No review or opinion is going to do that for you. It is only when you ride the bike, when you experience it and fall in love with it for the way it is and eventually look past its flaws is when it will make the most sense to you. And it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. This seems romantic and poetic, but that's just how it is. This isn't a practical purchase in any possible way. And it is not even trying to be. This is an emotional investment. If you've fallen in love with it, the practicality is irrelevant. Owning this bike will be an exclusive experience for you. Just like my GT650, there will be very less of these on the road. And hence the novelty factor will last much longer and will keep giving you that special feeling. You will turn heads everywhere you are with this bike and will always be answering random strangers on the road with a smile on your face. And at the end of a ride, when you reach at a scenic place, you will get off the bike and click pictures of it against the background before clicking pictures of even yourself. I don't think you'd ever do that to any practical, value for money, utilitarian vehicle that you buy. You do that only to something like this. Thank you for watching.